Imagine waking up in a new apartment. You've just moved in. The boxes are still stacked against the walls.
Right, total chaos everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. You haven't even figured out which light switch does what. But instead of that fresh start feeling, that sense of a blank canvas,
Oh, yeah.
there is this heavy, palpable density in the air. You
Yeah.
can't see it, you can't touch it, but you just feel it pressing against your skin.
Like the air itself is thick.
Yes. And as the days bleed into weeks, you slowly start to realize that this space isn't just carrying the residual energy of whoever lived there before.
It feels infected.
It does.
Yeah.
And the truly terrifying part, you
Mhm.
start to wonder if that infection is literally in the air you're sharing with the person sleeping right next to you.
I mean, that completely upends our fundamental understanding of what a home is supposed to be, right?
Totally.
We're conditioned to view our living spaces as sanctuaries, a physical barrier that keeps all the dangers of the outside world, firmly on the outside.
But when the architecture itself becomes the threat,
Exactly. When the environment meant to protect you is the danger, the psychological toll is just immense.
and that profound vulnerability is exactly what we're exploring today. We are looking at this deeply unsettling and, honestly, brilliantly layered collection of personal notes and manuscripts by Vec Lewis.
She's an incredible writer.
She really is. She's an Australian writer of Anglo-Indian heritage, and her work, specifically this piece surrounding an environment she calls Apartment 11.
Along with some fragments from her manuscript, Loop Vertigo.
Right. It's just phenomenal. She explores physics, metaphysics, and what she terms the uneasy architectures of kinship.
I love that phrase.
Me too. So, to you listening right now, welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to trace how a physical living space, a severe biological illness, and the total collapse of a relationship all blur into one single inescapable reality.
What's fascinating here is Lewis is doing something entirely unique. She's not giving us your traditional haunting.
Right. No rattling chains or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, you won't find poltergeists throwing plates across the kitchen. Instead, she is offering a masterclass in how our physical surroundings operate as a macroscopic mirror for our psychic and bodily decay.
Like the building is reflecting the people inside it.
Exactly. Her focus is intensely fixed on these processes of growth, decay, and metamorphosis. She basically posits that what breaks down in the mind inevitably manifests in the biology of the body.
And then it doesn't stop there.
No, eventually that decay literally seeps out into the drywall and the floorboards of the rooms we inhabit.
And it really does seep out. I mean, it floods out, actually. But we will get to the literal plumbing a bit later.
Right, yeah, the plumbing.
But to understand how we get to that point, we have to look at how our protagonist ends up in Apartment 11 in the first place. Because this is not some, exciting real estate upgrade.
Not at all.
The protagonist and their partner had spent 8 years putting down really deep roots in their previous home. They had a backyard, they had stability.
A real foundation.
Yeah. But then, almost exactly as the protagonist's mother falls seriously ill, they get this sudden notice from their landlord. The property is being sold.
They're forced out.
Right. They have to make this hurried, completely unwanted move into Apartment 11.
And that context is just so vital. It establishes this total loss of agency. The move is coerced by external forces, and it's happening under the heavy, suffocating shadow of profound grief.
Because of the mother's illness.
Exactly. The protagonist is constantly traveling back and forth across the country to Perth to care for her. So because of this, they are barely even present in this new apartment.
It's just a transient space for them.
Right, which amplifies that feeling of displacement. They haven't grounded themselves, so the space just remains alien.
Which brings us to this incredibly strange, crucial flash forward early in the notes. The protagonist visits a psychic.
This part is so eerie.
It really is. So this psychic supposedly channels the protagonist's mother, who has recently passed away. But the mother doesn't offer, comforting platitudes.
No, she speaks in these broken fragments.
Yeah. She says, not the visible rooms, something underneath. And then she delivers this very specific warning. She says, be careful what you take in what settles.
On the surface, that sounds like standard esoteric advice you might get at a spiritual reading, right?
Act your energy, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Don't take in toxic emotions. Don't let resentment settle in your heart. But the brilliance of Lewis's narrative is how she takes those abstract spiritual warnings and eventually grounds them in absolute terrifying biological reality.
Even the apartment's name, like the number 11, starts to act like this psychological weight.
Oh, the numerology aspect.
Yeah. When you are grieving and completely unmoored, your brain just looks for patterns, right?
Well, we crave order.
We do.
Mm.
So the protagonist starts obsessing over the visual shape of the number 11. It looks like an equality sign, two parallel vertical lines.
But there is absolutely zero equality in this relationship anymore.
None. It becomes this mocking visual symbol of two bodies living completely separate, parallel existences under the same roof. They never intersect.
They're just adjacent.
Right. The protagonist even starts diving into Kabbalah, numerology, string theory, wondering if a number is being done on them.
Exactly. When your foundational reality is dismantled, your mother is dying, your partner is emotionally volatile, your sanctuary is gone, the human brain desperately tries to find the hidden connective tissue of the universe.
It's a coping mechanism.
Totally. By looking into string theory or mystical traditions like Kabbalah, the protagonist is trying to find the mathematical or spiritual formula that explains their suffering.
They just want an underlying order to the chaos.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because reading through these early notes, I kept wondering, isn't this dark matter they feel in the apartment just a very natural byproduct of a terrible situation?
How so?
Well, think about it. You were evicted from a home you loved, your mother is on her deathbed, and you are trapped in a failing relationship.
That's a lot of stress.
Right. If you walk into a room right after two people have had a screaming match, you can physically feel the tension in the air.
You could cut it with a knife.
Exactly. The air feels thick. But the building isn't cursed, it's just human psychology. So why can't the haunting of apartment 11 just be the heavy, invisible baggage of profound grief?
I think you are supposed to ask that question. Lewis actually invites that skepticism.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The psychological dread is undeniable, and the grief is a very real gravity in the room. But she isn't satisfied with keeping it purely psychological.
She pushes it further.
She does. She immediately begins planting physical, environmental clues that suggest the tension is crossing over into something tangible.
Like the notice in the lobby.
Exactly. There is this recurring notice posted by the building's management. In Australia, they call it a strata notice, basically the housing association.
Right.
And this official notice repeatedly states, do not place objects in the basement.
A rule the couple immediately breaks, of course.
Because of course they do. But think about the mechanism of that notice. It is a strict rule about containment.
It's a boundary.
Right. The building management is essentially demanding that the hidden dark spaces below the visible architecture remain empty. It is an attempt to enforce a boundary.
Oh, wow. And if we think back to the psychic's warning from the mother.
Not the visible rooms, something underneath.
Yes. We start to see the physical building mirroring the spiritual warning. The architecture has rules. Those rules are being violated. And that sets the stage for the boundaries to fail completely.
When those boundaries fail, the entire nature of the threat changes. We transition from this emotional volatility, the partner threatening suicide, the shared depression.
Into a quiet, clinical, terrifying medical reality.
Yes.
The partner is diagnosed with tuberculosis. And this isn't standard pulmonary TB.
No, it's not.
It's a rare form that has traveled through the bloodstream and specifically infected the partner's eye.
This is the pivot point of the entire manuscript. We move from a narrative about emotional haunting to a story of biological horror.
It's so visceral.
It is. Tuberculosis is an airborne pathogen. It is fundamentally a disease of shared environments spread through microscopic droplets in the breath.
The haunting is no longer a metaphor.
No, it has a cellular reality now.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the room you are sitting in right now listening to this. When you close the windows and turn on the heating, you are creating a closed biological loop with whoever you live with.
Like a submarine.
Exactly, like a pressurized submarine. Reading Lewis's notes, the dark matter the protagonist felt shifts from being a bad vibe to a highly specific, terrifying question of what physically passes between two bodies in a confined space.
Just shared air.
Every single breath you take, every quiet moment sitting on the couch together feels like a potential contagion. You are sharing a microbiome.
And the silence in the apartment isn't just awkward anymore.
No. It's a void being actively filled by exhaled bacteria.
That concept of the void is crucial. In physics, nature abhors a vacuum, right? The heavy silences of their failing relationship create an emotional vacuum, and what rushes in to fill it? The breath.
Oh, that's horrifying.
The microscopic diseased particles passing between them. Suddenly, we have to entirely recontextualize the psychic's warning.
Be careful what you take and what settles.
Exactly. That is no longer just about guarding your emotional state. It is a literal medical directive about inhaling a pathogen and letting it settle in your lungs.
It is so incredibly unsettling. And if the air they are breathing is compromised by this microscopic pathogen, it's only a matter of time before the physical space itself starts manifesting that decay macroscopically.
Which leads directly to what Lewis describes as the tipping point.
Right. Because of the tension, they are sleeping in separate areas.
Yeah.
Again, those parallel lines of the number 11. The protagonist is downstairs.
And the partner is upstairs.
Yeah. In the half-light of the apartment, the lover beckons them to come upstairs to bed. But as the protagonist looks up at their partner, they physically recoil.
Because of the face.
Yes. In the shadows, the lover's face suddenly transposes and becomes the face of the protagonist's father. It shakes them so deeply that they never sleep beside each other again.
It's a profound rupture in their perceived reality. And notice how that rupture centers entirely on the mechanism of vision.
The act of seeing itself.
Exactly. The act of seeing becomes unstable and untrustworthy in this environment.
The motif of eyes throughout this entire manuscript is relentless. It starts with the partner's actual TB-infected eye.
And then Halloween.
Right. During Halloween, the protagonist walks past some decorative fake eyeballs, and it triggers this bizarre, exhausted emergency panic response.
It's as if the disease in the partner's eye is destroying the protagonist's ability to trust their own sight. Precisely. Because the infection is literally located in the organ of perception, the partner's eye, the act of looking, is compromised.
Wow.
The diseased vision of the partner seems to infect the protagonist's perception of the world around them. The boundary separating what is real, what is a psychological projection, and what is a medical symptom has completely collapsed.
Which brings us to the morning on the balcony.
Oh, the balcony scene.
The protagonist wakes up, exhausted, and walks over to the glass doors. Near the entrance, they see what looks like a scattered pile of rice grains.
But it's not rice.
No. As they get closer, the visual misdirection falls away and the horror sets in. It isn't rice. It is hundreds and hundreds of squirming maggots. And here is the truly, deeply disturbing part. There is absolutely no rotting meat anywhere.
No sort at all.
None. No spoiled garbage, no dead animal, no reason for them to be there. The protagonist completely panics, crushes every single one of them, and furiously scrubs the floor with bleach.
It's a remarkably visceral, sickening scene, and mechanistically it serves a very specific purpose in the narrative structure.
But wait, let me push back again here because I really struggled with this part of the notes. How much of this are we supposed to take literally?
What do you mean?
Well, the protagonist is traveling constantly across the country, grieving a dying mother, managing a partner with a severe bacterial infection, and living in constant emotional terror.
They're exhausted.
Beyond exhausted. Severe sleep deprivation and trauma can easily cause visual hallucinations. Couldn't the face in the shadows just be a trick of the light on a tired brain?
That's a fair point.
And couldn't the maggots just be a distorted, panic-induced memory of some old trash? Why do we have to assume the architecture of the apartment is actually manifesting this?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's actually the most rational conclusion to draw if you look at the overarching philosophy of Lewis's work. She isn't interested in an either-or explanation.
Oh, so both are true.
Exactly. She is proposing that all these realities coexist simultaneously. The extreme medical trauma and exhaustion don't negate the haunting. They are the catalyst for it.
I see.
The maggots are crucial because they represent a spontaneous biological emergence happening exactly where it shouldn't be.
Just like the TB.
Yes. Look at the mirroring happening here.
Yep.
You have TB bacteria growing in the fluid of an eye, a place it absolutely shouldn't be.
Right.
And you have maggots swarming on a clean balcony where there is no decay to feed them. The microscopic infection inside the body is being replicated as a macroscopic infestation inside the architecture of the apartment.
That makes so much sense. The apartment is acting like a physical body, and its immune system is starting to fail.
Exactly.
Because right after the maggots, the literal systems of the building begin to collapse. The plumbing goes first.
The downpipes.
Yeah, there's a massive sewerage problem where chunks of raw feces spill out of the unit's downpipes directly into the street.
Yeah.
The building is expelling its own waste in places it shouldn't. It's unable to contain its own toxicity.
It's a failure of homeostasis.
Yeah.
A healthy body and a healthy building both rely on strict boundaries.
Keeping things where they belong.
Right. Keeping the waste in the pipes, keeping the blood in the veins. What we are seeing here is the total collapse of the boundaries that separate the inside from the outside.
Around this time, the mother finally passes away. And seeking some kind of reset, the protagonist takes a trip to Kolkata to get some distance from the partner and the apartment.
A much-needed escape.
Definitely. The notes describe this trip beautifully, framing it as a journey inward to the city of joy, a place unstrung from the recent colonial ghosts that haunt their life in Australia.
It sounds liberating.
It is liberating, but when they return to Sydney, whatever fragile boundary was left completely shatters.
They return altered, perhaps more attuned to the reality of the decay. And what greets them is the total systemic failure of Apartment 11.
A freak storm hits the city. The drains completely back up and the apartment slowly begins to flood. And the partner's reaction is almost more chilling than the water itself.
It's so detached.
Right. The partner casually says, "Oh, that happened while you were in India, but I used the plunger."
A plunger.
I know, it is such a bizarre, detached dismissal that it completely breaks the continuity of reality. A plunger isn't going to stop a flood.
Not at all.
The protagonist is suddenly wading through ankle-deep water, sweating in the rising indoor humidity, waiting hours for the state emergency service to arrive.
Just trapped in the dampness.
And the whole time, the water is just dripping steadily through the floorboards, bleeding down into the apartments below them.
Again, we see the failure of containment, the building is hemorrhaging, and remember that strata notice.
Do not place objects in the basement.
Exactly. When the protagonist is dealing with this flood, they make an archival discovery about the building's history that makes that notice suddenly feel less like a bureaucratic rule and more like a desperate quarantine order.
Yes. Late one night, they look into the history of the site. They find out that before it was converted into residential apartments, the building was an old warehouse that retained its original deep basement.
And do you remember what it was used for?
The original use of that warehouse. It was a facility for doll manufacture.
Which is such an unnerving revelation when you think about the mechanics of what a doll actually is.
It's creepy is what it is.
Well, yes, but it is a human form entirely devoid of interiority. It is a regulated manufactured body. But most importantly, what is the defining feature of a doll's face?
Artificial eyes.
Artificial eyes.
Wait, so the building's hidden history of manufacturing fake lifeless eyes is literally sitting directly beneath a man who is actively going blind from a bacterial infection in his real eye.
Yes.
That's not just an eerie coincidence. That's an architectural manifestation of his illness.
Exactly. The basement is a graveyard of artificial vision. You have the buried history of regulated lifeless eyes below, directly contrasting with the unregulated, diseased, infected eye of the partner living upstairs.
Wow.
When you realize that, the strata notice, demanding that nothing be placed down there, reads as an attempt to keep the building's dark subconscious buried.
To keep it contained.
Right, to prevent the unregulated, diseased overflow that is currently drowning the protagonist upstairs.
It's all connected. The biology, the history, the plumbing, and the tension finally reaches its absolute breaking point.
It had to.
The recriminations after the flood are too much, the silence in the apartment becomes unbearable, and the protagonist asks the partner to leave. The relationship collapses entirely.
They pack up to return to Mexico.
Right. But right before they leave, there is a moment where the partner finally senses and hears the ghosts themselves. They confirm that the space is, in fact, inhabited by something else.
But here is the massive twist in the manuscript.
It's only after the partner is gone, when the protagonist is finally sitting completely alone in the silent, empty space of apartment 11, that they start hearing and sensing the ghosts too.
It completely destabilizes everything we and the protagonist thought we understood. The protagonist has spent the entire narrative viewing the partner as the source of the decay.
Like they were the carrier of the disease.
Exactly, the volatile energy ruining the sanctuary.
So what does this all mean? Left alone with the ghosts, the protagonist starts fact-checking their own past. They look back at their previous houses in Perth.
Specifically what they call the dark rooms of the father.
Right, at a place called Elatine Place, where a mysterious fungal and bacterial illness had once sickened their entire family. They realize with horror that the dark entities didn't spawn in apartment 11.
They followed them.
Yes. The protagonist realizes they had misrecognized the partner as the source of the darkness. In the notes, they compare it to Goethe's shadow in the fantasy novel A Wizard of Earthsea.
Oh, that's a great reference.
If you haven't read it, it's a story where a young wizard accidentally unleashes a dark shadow into the world and spends the whole book running from it.
Only to realize at the very end that the shadow is actually a piece of his own soul.
Exactly. You can't outrun it because it is you. The protagonist was projecting their own inherited darkness onto the partner, but the partner wasn't the source.
The partner was just another vulnerable host. This raises an important question, and it takes us right back to the psychic's warning from the very beginning. Be careful what you take and what settles.
The warning that started it all.
Right. We can now see the brilliant, tragic triple meaning Lewis has constructed throughout these notes. First, it was a warning about emotional intake.
Absorbing the despair and inherited trauma.
Yes. Second, it was an atmospheric warning about a building that was fundamentally broken, warning against letting its history settle over them.
The doll factory in the basement.
Exactly. But third, and most terrifyingly, it was a literal biological warning, breathing in the tuberculosis pathogen.
The share air.
Right. The narrative forces us to ask, what is inhaled? What is absorbed? What is inherited from our families? And what do we inadvertently transmit to the people we love?
The ambiguity doesn't resolve.
No, it just deepens.
Yeah.
Is the darkness in the architecture of the building? Is it in the biology of the body? Or is it in the very air suspended between two people?
It is an absolutely haunting realization. And once you see the connections Lewis is making between the physical walls around us and the microscopic battles happening inside our bodies, you really can't look at your own home the same way again.
You really can't.
So to you listening, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over today as you sit in your living room or walk down your hallway. Look at the walls around you.
Just observe them.
Yeah. If our buildings truly act as macroscopic bodies that absorb our history, our hidden illnesses, and our unspoken resentments, at what point do you stop inhabiting your home and your home starts inhabiting you?